what are the numbers here we need to know?
Yeah, so inflation came in higher than expected for the fourth month in a row. So since December, we have been running with more inflation than expected, and really a pretty high number for 3 months in a row. When it first started happening, people said, well, maybe it's just a seasonal thing. Numbers get wacky in December. People buy a lot in December, so maybe that pushes up inflation. Companies often reset prices in the beginning of the year, so January, maybe that was wonky. It happened again in February, and people were like, well, maybe that, bump became a longer bump. But once at this point, inflation is embedded in the economy. We've had too many months of higher than expected inflation, of really stubborn inflation. We're not talking about inflation going up to 9% again like we had a year and a half ago, but we are talking about inflation not coming towards 2%, which is the Federal Reserve's target, but getting stuck between 3 and 4%, which is frankly way too much inflation. People will feel that. It hurts. It eats away at your savings, and it makes it very hard for you to keep up, because if you get a raise, your boss gives you a raise of 3% at the end of the year, you say, hooray, right? I got a raise. But prices go up 4%, you can afford less, so you're getting poorer as time goes on.
Yep. Okay, so that's its own problem. I think many people are looking at the rates. What does this do for a rate? Because I got a pretty big rate right now, and the whole thing was, what do you fall in love with the house and date the rate or whatever? So it's like, all right, when are we lowering the rates here so we can get a refinance?
Right. So that's a big problem. I hate to tell you. So the mortgage rates are going to go up. The Fed's, a lot of people thought the Fed would start cutting in June. I mean, a few months ago, people were saying they were going to cut in January, and then it was March, and then it was May. The latest was, up until just a couple days ago, they said it's going to cut in June. Now, there's no way a June cut happens. Probably not a July cut. That would push them into September. I guarantee you they're not going to cut 8 weeks before Election Day. That would look very political to do your very first cut right before Election Day. So no cut in September. The next meeting is actually the day after Election Day. Maybe they cut then, but I doubt it. I think they'd want to see how the economy is developing as we get hopefully a new president in office. And so they don't cut in November, maybe December. The big danger here, though, is if inflation keeps coming in hot, that the next move isn't a cut at all, but an increase. I don't think they're going to increase this year, but I do think they start to increase. There's a good chance that they start to increase maybe as early as March of next year. Now, again, the Fed still really wants to cut. They still think they're going to cut. The question is just, will the economic data cooperate with their plans? And right now, it's not doing that.
Wow. Okay, so I was talking to a mortgage guy the other day, and he was still talking about 4 rate cuts this year. Are you are you suggesting he wanted to make a sale?
Yeah, that's not happening. There's not enough time, frankly, to do 4 cuts. The Fed meets 8 times every year. We're 2 meetings in. The next meeting is in May. So there's 5 meetings left. There's not time for 4 cuts. That definitely will not happen. So the market right now is pricing in 2 cuts. It used to be pricing in 3 or 4. It's 2 now. That's overly optimistic. I think we're probably looking at no cuts at all this year, and maybe a cut next year. Maybe you get 1 cut this year. Maybe they get one in at some point, but it's looking really improbable because the Fed really wants to see evidence that they're moving to 2% inflation. There's no evidence coming out of the inflation numbers that we're moving to 2% inflation. There's evidence we came down from a very high inflation number, no evidence that we're going further down. And the other reason the Fed would cut would be because the labor market was doing bad, because people were losing jobs, because the unemployment rate was shooting up. None of that is happening. So there's no impetus to have to cut. And there's no, on the inflation side, the numbers are not screaming cut, cut, cut. They're screaming at least hold and maybe hike.
Okay, so this is the New York Times. U.S. employers add 303,000 jobs in 39th straight month of growth. So Biden's team, of course, is going to say that this is wonderful news. Is it? How are we to look at this?
Yeah, so it's always great when we're adding jobs. But what I'll say is when it comes to looking at things like what's going to happen to interest rates, the Fed has a dual mandate. It's to have price stability, meaning no inflation, and to have maximum employment. So when we have 39 months of job growth and it doesn't seem to be stopping in any sense, then you solve the employment mandate. We're at full employment, and there's no way, then there's nothing, and we're still not at correct levels of inflation, so you can't cut. So it is good news. We want people to have jobs, but that's not the problem in the economy right now. We're creating plenty of jobs. The problem is the inflation. The only way to get that down is probably, one, massive reductions in the budget deficit. When the Fed is pumping this much money into the economy, it's going to cause inflation. And then two, you probably need further tightening of monetary policy, which means higher interest rates.
Looking at some articles from you and Wendell about different aspects of the economy. Elementary, high school tuition up 4.8, daycare and preschool up 4.4, rent 4.7, water and sewer 5%, garbage and trash 5.8, electricity 5%, repair of household items 18% increase. So everything's up.
Yeah.
What are you seeing? What stands out to you among these?
So a few things that are really interesting in these numbers is people are wondering, well, why did my homeowner's insurance or my renter's insurance go up by so much? Because that's up by a lot. I think it's 11%. Well, the reason is because of that repair of household items number. It's up 18% year over year. So the cost of fixing things in your house that go wrong is up by a lot. That's a huge part of that is labor costs. When unemployment gets super low, people start to raise the amount they charge to work. And so so repair of household items is up. You can also look at auto insurance is up 22%. 90% of households own cars in America. So this is a number that everybody has to pay. You don't have a choice. You can't. Yeah, you know what I'm going to do without car insurance right now. Legally, you have to have car insurance. So so it's 20. So that's up 22%. One of the reasons for that is if you look up the cost of repairing a car, that is also skyrocketing. So insurance companies are saying, hey, look, the frequency of accidents has increased because, frankly, cops are afraid to pull anybody over because they get protested every time they do. And then the cost of repairing things is up. So, of course, your insurance rates are going up. And people are feeling this, again, like garbage collection. If you live in a town that you have private garbage collection, which a lot of Americans do, you're paying more for garbage collection. If you have to have private sewer costs, and a lot of people pay their water bills, those are going through the roof. Electricity is up. These are just the costs of living, and it's costing people a lot more money.
Well, 40% grocery price increase over the last couple of years.
Yes.
That's the big one. So Ron Klain, who was Trump's former chief of staff, he was at an event.
Biden's
he said, I think the president's out there. Former is the key word here. He says, I think the president's out there talking too much about bridges. He does 2 or 3 events a week where he's cutting a ribbon on a bridge. I'll tell you, if you go into the grocery store and milk and eggs are expensive, the fact that there's a blanking bridge is not, and then you can't pick up with the audio, but
right.
you can insert any number of words. He's not a congressman. He's not running for Congress. I think it's a fool's errand. I think it also doesn't get covered much because, look, it's a blanking bridge. Like, it's a bridge. How interesting is a bridge? It's a little interesting, but it's not a lot of interesting. How is Biden, what is he saying about the economy doing swell right now? And how is he going to, do you think, is he going to spin this in the next 200 days?
Well, so yes, the Ron Klain remarks are really interesting because it shows that the Democrats are in a panic. They realize Biden is doing a very bad job of selling people on his economy. And frankly, Biden can't help himself but lie. Yesterday, he said he inherited inflation. This is one of his things he loves to say, that anything bad that's happening is Donald Trump's fault, and anything good is Joe Biden's credit. But it's a lie that he inherited inflation. When he took office, inflation was running at 1.4%, so below the Fed's target. When he came into office, he put in a massive spending program called the American Rescue Plan, and then he continued to double down and spending over spending, so that we're running budget deficits that we have not run outside of a recession ever. So that this is sort of World War II style budget deficits, stuff you run when you are in an emergency. We're running that. That is feeding inflation. He did that. It drove up inflation. We would have had a little inflation coming out of the pandemic, no doubt. We had a lot of supply chain problems. What we wouldn't have had is the persistent inflation that lasts far beyond the supply chain problems. We fixed the supply chains. We still have inflation. This is because they drove demand. Absolutely crazy, broke the economy. And Biden can't fix it very quickly. It's one of those things where, you break your parents' lamp and then you try to glue it back together and pretend that nothing happened. They're going to notice. And American people are noticing that he broke the economy.
Yeah, and the parents are coming home in like 20 minutes.
Exactly.
So you can't even, even if you figured out a way to get it done. John Carney, Breitbart Business Editor. Go to the Breitbart Business Digest, or go to read any of John Carney's articles, and you can see where to subscribe to the Breitbart Business Digest on Breitbart.com. John, great to talk to you, brother. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.